Hello and welcome to Premier Study in Investing. It's great to have you. Thanks for stopping by. Hey my friends, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Hey, I did have a request. If you don't like this content, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. I know people don't say that, but I'm trying to decide if this is a worthwhile endeavor. If you like the content, give me a thumbs up. So I want to look at Moderna, obviously. Let's look at the chart and then I'll show you two clips. One from Solari Report and one from Ed Dowd. I like both these people. They shared some interesting content. In case you missed it, their views impacted me for sure.
Now, it's tools of control.
Yes, oh, absolutely. You're right.
So Bobby has basically saved Moderna's bacon.
Yeah.
Right. And the question is, how many children will this kill?
No, he saved. Right. He certainly saved Moderna shareholders, though. Well done, sir.
So the reason I'm trying to say this in a very clear, blunt way is you need to see through the mask.
Yeah.
Take off the mask and let's look at what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
Okay, so good stuff there. On the left, you have Catherine Austin Fitts. She's former U.S. Housing Secretary. And on the right, John Titus. John Titus, I heard about really from TruthStream Media, Whitney Webb, and some other folks. So John is a former lawyer. Obviously, that you heard what they said about. Even it was so funny to listen to John Titus sort of stumble, like not knowing what to say about Catherine's comments about the loss of the children. So I shouldn't laugh. It's just one of those things that it really gets to me. And it may be that I shouldn't be investing in something that I have like emotional, moral ties to. So, but let's go ahead and look at the chart. Okay, here we've had an interesting run up, multiple bottom, and then I'm not sure technically if this qualifies as a double top, but it's pretty close. You had 2 days where the peak was in the $34 range. And so here we're back $34.15. We also have earnings coming out on August 1st. The other really interesting thing is that the short float continues to go up 19.34%. So that's really nuts. What's the EPS expected for next quarter? Loss of about $3 a share. Okay, so I'm really starting to feel like the bulls may have it that I've been wrong. HHS is not going to work out. Let's hear what Ed Dowd has to say. I'm definitely going to be taking a close look at this double top come Monday, 28th of July. And then a few days after that, on August 1st, we're going to have earnings for Q2. And I would say if we blow through the resistance and head on up above $34, $35, I'm really considering switching positions. Or if something really incredible happens, which I don't think is going to happen on the earnings report, especially since they lost that grant for bird flu. But if there's any surprise millions of dollars that came into this thing, I think the bulls have it. Let's hear what Ed has to say.
Great. A lot of people from the MAGA group are losing trust for the other side too now. So it seems like this whole divide and conquer strategy, even between the two-party system, is getting stronger, I would say. And it seems like they're paving the way for a new kind of party. Whether it succeeds or not is irrelevant, but as far as the narrative, putting it out there, you plant the seed, and it can grow. It really could. What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be successful, but the point is taken. It's a seed. And I said, 3 years ago that what happened during the magic juice era, the COVID pandemic, was designed to destroy all faith in all institutions. And that's what it did. And that's where we are. And now we're seeing the new administration getting in there. And look, I'm going to give them a little out, not much of an out, but, they get in there. These bureaucracies are big. Running, when you drop into an institution as the head of a department, it takes you time to understand the institutional knowledge, how things actually work, and how to affect change. The ticks, the apparatchik ticks, the deep state, administrative state are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. And they're thwarting a lot of these efforts. And it presents to the American public as, oh, you're betraying us. And so there will be some actual betrayals, but a lot of it is just inertia. And, I look at an institution like the FDA. It needs to be, everybody needs to be fired and it needs to be built from the ground up again.
Okay, one thing I would say with great confidence is that they are not going to clear out the entire FDA like Ed was talking about. That's not happening. He's kind of gracious. He gives us the most gracious sort of view that, hey, Bobby and the team are doing as best they can, but they're, waist deep in the swamp, and there's this bureaucracy, and he's using these terms like there's this velocity, and it's hard to turn a ship that's already going 100 miles an hour down the mRNA path. But here's what we got. May 31st, FDA approved Moderna's next generation mRNA COVID vaccine. It's called mNEX Spike. It was the 1283 product, targeted a portion for, okay, so COV2, this is for seniors, okay, or those aged 12 to 64 who are at risk. So I misunderstood this apparently, and I'm going to take a look here at Vinay Prasad after we look at an Epoch Times audio clip. But then about 2 weeks later, July 10th, full FDA approval of Spikevax for children 6 months to 11 years, specifically for those at higher risk of severe disease. Okay, so here's just a quick look at what we got from the McCary and Vinay Prasad article. Basically, this is the future. People over 65 years basically are eligible, or if you're under 65 with at least one risk factor for severe COVID-19, then they're going to basically do it off immunologic endpoints. We'll hear from him in a second, a little bit more about what that means. But then for this age group, 50 to 64, without any risk factors, recommended. And we'll see, I think this is what really trips me up, is that I thought the FDA was in charge, and I think we're going to find out that that's wrong, if that's what you were thinking. These are just recommendations. You'll hear that more clearly if you go back and listen to it with a close ear. But these are just recommendations, so the FDA is not going to be able to force any randomized placebo-controlled trials. And also these are post-marketing, which means this is after it's already available for sale to the public. This is about 18 million, 61.2 million people. Sorry, 18% of the U.S. population. And then sponsor-driven random placebo-controlled trials. Again, I thought that was going to be required for ages 6 months to 64-year-olds without any risk factors. And that's not really being required either. So all this stuff, I mean, I thought, wow, we're really going to have a lot of required placebo-controlled trials. And this article, you can find at Epoch Times. It was July 22nd, and it's really discussing the HHS, how these new products got pushed through while RFK supposedly was on vacation. Is that true? Is that even relevant? Is this a story about how basically somebody can come in and either blackmail these folks that are going to be talked about that were either released or fired? There's some controversy about that. The story kind of changed. But this story is about basically like a couple people that seem to have approved a go-ahead green light. That's the story we're being told for these mRNA products. You take a listen. You let me know what you think.
HHS responds after claim officials approved Moderna vaccine while RFK Jr. was on vacation. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was not supposed to be apprised ahead of time of the Food and Drug Administration's decision to expand its approval of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. The Department of Health and Human Services said in response to reports that officials approved the vaccine without Kennedy's knowledge. For legal and scientific integrity purposes, all FDA product decisions are made at the FDA level. The HHS Secretary and his immediate office are not briefed on product decisions before they are announced. A spokesperson for HHS told the Epoch Times in an email on July 21st. The FDA on July 10th approved Spikevax, the vaccine for children ages 6 months through 11 years with at least one risk factor. Following the approval, an HHS spokesperson said top officials with the agency had been fired, although one of those officials said she had resigned. A fake X account purporting to belong to Kennedy stated on Monday that the officials were fired for acting on their own and greenlighting Moderna's vaccine.
Okay, but that was from a fake X account, so that's obviously irrelevant.
While the Gateway pundit said in a July 21st post that Kennedy reportedly fired the officials because they approved the vaccine while he was on vacation, the latter has since updated its story to remove the claim. Kennedy was outside the country when the new approval was announced. A source familiar with the situation told the Epoch Times on condition of anonymity. HHS was subsequently flooded with calls and messages expressing concern over the approval. The source said, Dr. Robert Malone, who was appointed to a federal vaccine advisory panel by Kennedy, wrote in a blog post on Monday that Kennedy was on a working vacation at the time of the approval announcement, taking calls, participating in briefings, and mulling over critical matters. Heather Flick-Melanson, who had been the HHS chief of staff, told the Epoch Times via email that she was on a flight on July 10th without working internet. Were officials involved? The FDA approved the Spikevax license through its normal process, Melanson said. The front office had nothing to do with it. She added later, I would never have the power to approve a biologic or drug, never, nor. While the secretary was on vacation. Melanson says she is a supporter of President Donald Trump and that she was not fired, but resigned. Hannah Anderson.
I mean, can we take any of that seriously? These are comments of someone who either got fired or she claims that she resigned and that she couldn't do whatever. What actually happened here? It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that these stories are coming out.
Who had been the HHS deputy chief of staff before recently being ousted, could not be reached for comment. HHS has not specified why Melanson and Anderson are no longer with the agency. Malone said that he was not sure whether the terminations were related to the failure to inform Kennedy ahead of time of the Spikevax approval. He said that he and others insisted that there be consequences for failing to brief the chain of command, that there is solace in knowing that there were prompt consequences, and that the federal bureaucracy must recognize that there will be consequences for failing to brief their command chain on politically sensitive decisions.
So Malone, who you would imagine went through hell basically for a number of years in order to oppose mRNA tech, now he's on the immunologics board, basically appointed under Kennedy. And do you think he's lying? I mean, if you don't like the guy or you think he's like a snake oil salesman, then you're probably not going to put any credit to what he has to say. But if you're on the other side, more like the Maha side, more the side that this is a failed technology and it's kind of this, as Ed says, we're just dealing with this apparatus that has a lot of velocity moving in a certain direction that's pro mRNA tech, and then it just takes a long time to turn the ship 180. Well, that's the other side of it. So I would say let's consider that Robert Malone is like honest, and what is he saying? He thinks that it's basically good that there was some people that were reprimanded for not notifying the chain of command. That's not really the same as saying, well, these people basically went behind everyone's back while our secretary of HHS was on vacation and basically gave the green light, and now we can't do anything to stop it or reverse it. That's not what he really said. He just felt like he was saying that people should have been informed. This is a big deal. I guess they do things without his permission. They don't respect the guy. There's probably no surprise. There's probably people in CDC, FDA that don't respect or like that Kennedy got the appointment. I don't know. Let's see.
FDA decision means Spikevax has been approved by the FDA since 2022, but only for certain ages. Before the new approval, the vaccine was approved for individuals who were at least 12 years of age. It was also available under emergency authorization for children from 6 months of age to 11 years old. The decision broadened the approval down to 6 months of age. It also limited the approval. While the new approval is for all people aged at least 65, it is only for those under the age of 65 with at least one risk factor that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says places people at higher risk of severe COVID-19 outcomes. Those factors include asthma, cancer, pregnancy, and tuberculosis. Prasad overruled reviewers. FDA staffers who reviewed Moderna's application for a license, which sought approval for all children 6 months and older, reached a different conclusion than Dr. Vinay Prasad, the agency's top vaccine official. Prasad said in a memorandum made public on July 11th. Prasad said that there is not sufficient evidence to be certain that the benefits of Spikevax outweigh the harms for healthy children. He also said the evidence shows the benefits outweigh the harms for children with one or more risk factors. Prasad also overruled FDA reviewers in the 2 other decisions on COVID-19 vaccines made since Kennedy took office in February. The reviewers favored making a new Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, mNEXSpike, and Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine available to all people who are at least 12 years old, regardless of health. Prasad said the evidence only supported approving the vaccines for those aged 12 to 64, with at least one risk factor in addition to all people 65 years of age and older. Makary addresses criticism. Dr. Marty Makary, the FDA's commissioner, told the Epoch Times in a recent interview that the FDA granted the approvals in part to convince companies to run clinical trials. We have a situation whereby we would love these companies to run a proper randomized controlled trial. And so if you do nothing, if you reject the COVID vaccines as they come to you for approval, then you have no leverage to be able to ask the company to do that, and those studies may never be done, he said.
Okay, hold on. Here's the thing about that, though. Let's say they're asking for approval for 5 different products, right? And the thinking is, well, if we reject the first one, we'll lose our leverage and we can't make them do any controlled trials. So you accept the first one and say, please do the controlled trials, right? And then they say, well, approve our second one. You're in the same boat. So now you got to approve the second one, or else you lose your leverage. So then it's like, okay, the second one and the first one is approved. Please run these controlled trials, these placebo-controlled trials. Pretty pleased with the cherry on top. We don't want to pay for it. You're a big pharma. Please do it. We strongly recommend. And you'll hear that exact type of words from him. And then they're like, well, we actually have 3 more approvals that we'd like you to go ahead and greenlight. And then maybe we can talk. Of course, fast forward. It could endlessly go on like that, couldn't it? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you ever stop approving stuff for them, then you quote unquote lose their leverage. So what I didn't understand, what I thought when I saw stuff like this, these recommended placebo-controlled trials here for age 50 to 64, or the sponsor-driven randomized placebo-controlled trials for any age, 6 months to 64, without risk factors. I thought that is what will be happening, but these are it's just not really the case. These are not mandated or mandatory, as you just heard. So let's hear that again real quick, just so you.
And older. Makary addresses criticism. Dr. Marty Makary, the FDA's commissioner, told the Epoch Times in a recent interview that the FDA granted the approvals in part to convince companies to run clinical trials. We have a situation whereby we would love these companies to run a proper randomized controlled trial. And so if you do nothing, if you reject the COVID vaccines as they come to you for approval, then you have no leverage to be able to ask the company to do that, and those studies may never be done, he said. Makary and Prasad had earlier in the year outlined how the FDA's new leaders would no longer approve COVID-19 vaccines absent clinical data for many Americans. But they also said that data from antibody testing would be enough to secure approval for the elderly and younger people with underlying conditions. We are going to be okay with the COVID vaccines in high-risk Americans, which is a much more limited indication, Makary told the Epoch Times.
Look, you can see on the screen that represents millions of people. Top bracket, over 100 million. This bracket, 50 to 64-year-olds. This has no additional risk factors. They say that's 61 million people. But then this is for, again, without risk factors. They're basically approving it for anybody that has any risk factors. And let's go and look at some of that.
I want to also preface this by saying that I'm a long-standing believer in and have written many, or at least 2 books on the topic of evidence-based medicine. So I believe the purpose of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is always and only to act in the best interest of the American people, and this document is motivated by that spirit. People and patients are our number one stakeholder. And the FDA will continue to balance regulatory flexibility with gold standard science, and we make that clear in this document. This is an important message. Randomized controlled trials are not always needed in medical science. That's been my position for more than 15 years now, but they are sometimes needed in medical science, and this document walks you through where they are and where they aren't needed. In terms of COVID-19 further background, I think we have to admit to ourselves that America is deeply divided on the policy issue of repeat COVID-19 vaccine doses or boosters. There are some Americans out there who are worried target. And going forward, we will apply the following evidence-based framework to evaluate all the COVID-19 vaccines. So based on prior immunologic endpoints, that means proof that the vaccine can create antibodies in people, companies can apply for, and we will consider approval for 65 and older, and or people at high risk of severe COVID-19. So if you're old,
So it just has to create antibodies, which everyone knows it can produce antibodies. The problem is the risk, the side effects, the neurological problems, the heart disease, the blood-brain barrier, the turbo cancers, on and on and on, right? This is the problem. We know that, yeah, you can send in the messenger RNA and get the cells to produce antibodies. So that's for 100,000 people. That's not the issue that anybody is really worried about for those that are worried about these products. Did I say infertility? Did I say miscarriages?
older than 65 and high risk for COVID-19, we're going to use the immunologic endpoints we've been using to grant approval. This is a tremendously broad category. This effectively means 100 to 200 million Americans, those with the most favorable benefit to harm balance, will be covered by such approvals. The CDC has a list of the...
I just want to interject I always think it's a strong argument to say if these products aren't safe enough for our healthy people, then do we really want to give it to our sick and our infirm? I mean, I always felt like that is a pretty good argument.
Conditions that qualify as high risk for severe COVID-19. You can peruse the list. It's also in our New England Journal paper. It is a broad list. There's a lot of things on.
So I'm just going to read through this. It's anyone with asthma. This is anyone who would have at least one risk factor. Like we saw here, they were doing what approvals for these folks. So seniors and anyone 12 to 64 at risk. So all seniors and basically most of the population if they have one risk factor. And then for Spikevax, 6 to 11 years old, these are kids. We've always known that this hasn't been a very significant disease for young people. They'll give us some information on that, but which would be good to look at, you know. But again, the kids with a high risk. So let's go back. What are the high risk? It's asthma. Okay, a lot of kids have asthma, cancer. I mean, that's a big one. Cerebrovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, people on dialysis, chronic lung diseases. I mean, that makes sense. Chronic liver disease. I'm just saying it makes sense in the sense that there would be an elevated risk. Cystic fibrosis, diabetes 1, 2, gestational diabetes, disabilities including Down syndrome, heart conditions, heart failure, coronary artery disease, cardiomyopathies, HIV, mental health illness or condition always seems questionable. Mood dysregulation, depression, schizophrenia. I don't know. Does that really make you more vulnerable to a basically respiratory virus? Neurological conditions like dementia or Parkinson's. Obesity. I think a ton of people are obese, given the food. Pregnancy, recent pregnancy. So pregnancy, a person who's pregnant, a woman who's pregnant, is considered high risk. So now we're going to vaccinate pregnant women. I think that's been a big concern. Primary immunodeficiencies, smoking, or if you ever smoked, does that include once? Solid organ or blood stem cell transplantations, tuberculosis, use of corticosteroids or other immunosuppressive medications. So corticosteroids was the thing that Dr. Pierre Corey really used a lot early in the pandemic and found it very effective. So that would put you at high risk. Those people, would be, you get what I'm saying. Let's keep listening.
This list, I'll just highlight a few. Obesity. All companies will be asked to conduct a randomized as we enter this set. At the same time, we want more evidence of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. We want to know more about what these products are doing, especially as we enter this 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Okay, so now we're talking about these post-marketing randomized placebo-controlled trials for people aged 50 to 64 without risk factors, right? Everybody that's high risk or has one risk factor, seems like they've pretty much all been given the green light. So now we're over to people without risk factors. This is just the small remnants of the population.
The dose. All companies will be asked to conduct a randomized controlled trial testing.
Hey, they're only being asked. They're just being asked. They're not required. They're just being asked. So I missed that. I heard all the randomized, placebo-controlled, gold standard science, all this stuff, RFK, MAHA, yeah. They're just asking. There's no, real leverage. There's no power to require proof. The MRNA 1283, which was approved after Vinay Prasad gave this presentation that we were watching, the mRNA 1283 got approved. And it got approved without being under a placebo-controlled trial. It was just compared to their other product, the Spikevax product. So there was no placebo-controlled trial there. Again, I was wrong. I was expecting that they were going to require that. So I was not expecting for 1283 to be approved. But I was wrong. I didn't understand correctly.
In their product as follows. Against a saline placebo, we want to know the full safety profile of these products. In a randomized controlled trial targeting people between the ages of 50 and up to 64, less than 65. The primary endpoint of this study will be clinical endpoints, which we'll talk about in a minute. And these data are vital to inform an updated risk-benefit analysis, an analysis that's fit for 2025. And many point to observational studies that allude to some of these endpoints, but the simple truth is the existing observational literature is at high risk of bias and broadly uninformative, in part because the people who choose to get the booster and the people who choose not to are not really the same groups of people. They're different in other ways, despite other than the booster.
Let me just take a second here and replay that quote from McCary about how this actually all has been working regarding the leverage.
Whereby we would love these companies to run a proper randomized controlled trial. And so if you do nothing, if you reject the COVID vaccines as they come to you for approval, then you have no leverage to be able to ask the company to do that, and those studies may never be done, he said. Makary and Prasad had earlier in the year outlined how the FDA's new leaders would no longer approve COVID-19 vaccines absent clinical data for many Americans. But they also said that data from antibody testing would be enough to secure approval for the elderly and younger people with underlying conditions.
That's this. That's immunologic endpoints. As he said, you just need to show that it creates an antibody response, which obviously it's able to do that. No one is really that upset besides like the waning efficacy, that it only lasts, it's only durable for maybe a few months or 6 months or whatever, but it decreases over time, the efficacy, which is why, 6, 7, 8 boosters, if someone was to stay on the schedule. So, I mean, but nobody is really arguing that it's lacking in its ability to produce antibodies. That's not the issue. I don't think that's ever been the issue or part of the debate. So that's how they are approving this top box here. They're asking in the orange and they're basically asking in the purple. I mean, it's over. It's over. The Bulls have it. The Bulls have it. That's what I would say. Let's see what happens off this double top. The only thing that's going to stop it is that just people decide either A, we all have natural herd immunity and we don't need any more of these boosters, or, just the general consensus is that these are dangerous, some kind of like grass move roots or some sort of like just belief among the public that demand just falls off a cliff, which I think there's something to say there. But what I'm trying to put together and convince you of or share with you what makes sense to me is that the regulatory MAHA thing is not going to stop the show on mRNA tech being given widely, including pregnant women, So all the John Campbell people and all of that stuff, the Hope Accord, getting Robert Malone in, getting Jay Bhattacharya in, I would just say it has negligible impact on approvals, as you can see here, I think you can clearly see here. So if you're going to short this stock, you have to short it simply on public awareness and the ability of not legacy media, but just, talking to your friends and family, people that lost their hearing, people that had heart attacks, Justin Bieber, whatever, some kind of just general belief that these are either A, unnecessary or B, dangerous. But they have not been able to ban any of these products in any of the United States. It's high vaccination rates in Japan, and recently there was a story that came out late July that Moderna decided not to do a production facility or manufacturing facility in Japan because of the business environment there, whatever the heck that means. So if demand collapses, it's because of just public awareness. The FDA, the CDC, Vinay Prasad, Martin McCary, these people are not coming to save anyone or save your kids or so whatever. So I should probably be really careful, from an investing standpoint. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but for me, it's just been like, hey, is this mostly about some like moral crusade? Protecting the weak, protecting the vulnerable? Is this some kind of like social, movement thing here to reform society and like Edward said, clean house at the FDA? Because if it's about making money, it would have been just better just to have bought calls on Palantir this year, And I'm no big fan of Palantir, and I think that many people have spoken about the control grid or the coming control grid, their surveillance or the data collection that they're doing as they're essentially government contractors, right? And they basically, what do? Their stock is up like 400% in the last 2 years or something. So No, it's because as Catherine Austin Fitts and John Titus were saying, that there's a lot of money to be made in creating tools of control. So, you know, I just think you got to think like buying calls on defense contractors. I mean, what's really happening, right? What's really happening in the world? There's increased global conflict, militarized conflict. It depends what you think as far as Edward Dow would say that we're coming into a recession in the end of Q4. He said it should have happened a couple of years ago, except that basically the government gave tons and tons of money to illegals in the United States. We had obviously a wild thing happen in the bond market and stock market in April with the Trump tariffs and all that stuff. Are they trying to protect the dollar? Is that what's going on? They're not willing to let capital markets crash. You have different people saying that as well. But I just think, man, I got to remove the piece of the regulatory apparatus really being against mRNA tech. And so if you remove that piece, I think the thesis for the bears to short the stock is significantly weakened. Yeah, it's like there's no way that the FDA or Vinay Prasad or anybody that I can tell is going to really come down hard on mRNA tech. It seems like it's just been given the green light. So you let me know what you think. Thanks. Hey, and good luck to the Bulls, and good luck to everybody, but congratulations to the Bulls who bought $25 now, $35. Could see 40. I mean, I think the Bulls have it.